I did fire quite a bit at him, and that's the first time I saw a Japanese machine anyhow. I couldn't see him, you could see his head in it. But they came over every day strafing, so I did quite a lot of trying to get him, but I was no good as a shot.
Mm.
So,
now, how long was the defence attempted by the Australian and Dutch forces
to attack the Japs?
Well, the Japs arrived.
Yeah.
Was it 3 or 4 days, or?
No, they landed there on the night of the 18th. So the 19th of February, 42, was the first day that our forces, that's the battalion and Colonel Leggett, would have or should have come in contact with them. But according to Harry yesterday, I don't think they did make contact with them for a day or two. So 20-odd thousand Japanese soldiers arrived, and they brought on land some tanks and mobile guns and so on. And according to Harry, who you talked to, he said they didn't really meet until at some bridge on the 3rd day or something.
Yes, yeah.
So I don't, you know, I was in the hospital at Champlain, and I was not part of the fighting that went on. So I can't tell you much about it.
The capitulation was on the 23rd, is that correct?
The capitulation on the 23rd,
yeah,
yes.
Yeah.
And that's the day they came up to us in the hospital and said, well, you're all prisoners of war now, get all your patients out and put them down. And we got all our patients out that we could get out, and we sat them down in this square, an open square. And Roy and I sat in the front of them, and they put up machine guns, 3 or 4 machine guns, and aimed them at us. And I said, well, this is it, Roy. And I said, this is the 23rd of February, it's my mother's wedding day, 1909, I remember that was the date she got married. And Roy said, well, it's my wife's birthday too. So I said, well, we've got 2 things to think about today on the 23rd. And I said, well, they won't know what's happening to us, but I don't think we'll be here much longer. Mm. And we sat there all the morning and watched them going round and looking into our place where we slept and looking into the hospital and bringing out bits of food and stuff. And eventually they said, all men get up. They decided not to shoot us. We didn't know why at the time, because they were the same invasion force that had been to Ambon, and they went on to Ambon about the 1st or the 2nd of February, and they made massacre up there. They cut off heads all over the place. And they said to us, Ambon, boom, 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 Ambon. Timor, no, Timor, no. So they decided not to shoot us on Timor. I think, don't forget, Singapore went down on the 15th of February, and Ambon was on the 2nd of February. So their orders would have been, don't take prisoners of war. But when they found that all of Singapore had capitulated, they'd have to alter their order. They couldn't shoot all the prisoners of war there. Oh. So the order must have gone around, don't shoot prisoners of war, and so we were lucky that way.
Yes. Now, during the period that you would have had your most battle casualties over this period.
Yeah.
Is there a particular medical orderly or medical orderlies that did work that you considered was extremely good?
All the orderlies were good. We trained them pretty well, you know. This 12 I had, I started training them down the Sydney showground and had 3 months in Darwin to join in with all our field ambulance stuff there. And there was many of them. One of them was my Batman, Thwaites was his name. And there were 2 others that finished up my leading men. Sergeant Adams, he was the engine driver of the Melbourne Express from Sydney to Goulburn every night. And Pat Bailey, who was, I don't know what he did before the war, but he and Bill and Adams developed a very good clinical sense. They did rounds of me every day, and they saw all the things I was seeing, the ulcers and the injuries and various things, and they became very adept. And I always said, in fact I wrote about it somewhere, that those two were as good as assistants as I'd ever had at any other operations after I returned. Bert Adams was funny. He had very little hair. It was all ginger and it was wiped from one side to the other, you know. And he used to tell me about he'd leave Sydney at 7 o'clock every night on the Melbourne Express, and he'd take it up as far as Goulburn, and then he'd change drivers and he'd bring the other one back to Sydney. And that was Bert's job.
Yes.
And he became, from an engine driver, he was a very, very good assistant in all the things I did.
His medical training only started from when he joined the services?
Yes. Oh yes, neither of them had anything to do with medicine.
Yes. Yeah, marvellous. Now what was, during the period that you were incarcerated on Timor, how long was it before you were moved to?
Oh, 6 months.
Java?
We went into camp there on the 23rd of February, day of capitulation, and we left there on the 23rd of September. So what's that, 6 or 7 months?
Yes.
And then we were on the ship for a week. We got to Surabaya on the, I think, the 30th of September. We got into train then, and they trained us from Surabaya to Batavia, and then marched us to cycle camp. So, marched us to Tanjong Priok. That's right, Tanjong Priok. The train went into the dock area, and that was the docks, and it was all down in terrible country and a lot of slums everywhere. But that's where our first camp was, at Tanjong Priok, and that's where we met large numbers of Englishmen. In fact, the camp there was run by a senior English officer. I can't remember his name now, but we didn't see much of him. But there were a lot of other intermediate English majors who were various experience, you know, full-time army men they were.
Now when did...
well organised, that camp.
Yes. When did Roy Stevens leave you?
He left in August. He left a month before we did. So I never saw him again. I don't know what camp he went into when he came to Java, but it wasn't long before he was on the way up to Malaya, on the way up to the Burma Road.
Yes.
Never saw Roy again until after the war.
Do you know the reason why he was shifted?
Oh no, they were taking lots of prisoners of war on these ships to go up to Burma, to go up to Bangkok. And, I was on a draft once, and the Nips pulled me off a draft because they knew I was the Podong doctor, the cutting doctor.
Yes.
And so, oh no, I was ready to go the next day. I'd only just got out to St Vincentius, and they were still sending troops away, and I found my name on the list, and I said to Roy, I've got to go, and then, oh, soon got off it. Thank goodness. Oh no, they were continually they were sending troops either to Borneo or to that other little island I mentioned, Haruku, up near Ambon, where they were building aerodromes all over the place. And they sent a lot round to Brunei and other parts of Borneo, as well as Japan. They were using the prisoners of war as workers, and they sent them up to Japan to get to work in the mines up there. And constantly they were sending them up to Burma until the railway was finished, and even then they kept them up in those areas, still making aerodromes for them.
Yes. Now we've just had a little pause, and there was a Flight Lieutenant McAllister captured in Timor, and he did some interesting things. Can you tell us something about it? He was shot down by the Japanese. He was flying one of our aircrafts that used to come over from Darwin every day, and he was chased by a Zero, and the Zero chased him into the ground, so he crashed, and they got him out and they brought him into our camp one afternoon. He came in, and we went to the CO, and we wondered who he was. Eventually we got to meet him, and he told us his story, how he'd been shot down. And so he joined the camp, and I don't think I saw much of him. He saw much more of a fellow called Piggott, Russell Piggott, and some of the others. Anyhow, he was there for a while, and then I didn't know it was happening, but one night
decided